Welcome to episode 90 of the Ski Podcast, and thanks for joining us. Today we're going to be chatting about skiing in Turkey. We would have Olympian Millie Knight joining us. She is about to appear in the Paralympics in Beijing, but guess what? She's busy at the moment, so I pre-recorded an interview with her, but we're going to be talking about the Paralympics and the Olympics, taking the train to Austria, and how to choose your rental ski boots. Firstly, I'd like to start off by thanking Switzerland Tourism for sponsoring the podcast. I'm very excited because I'm heading out to Andermatt next week, and also Aletsch Arena, which I've never been to before. So very excited about that. Listener, I recommend you go to Switzerland as well. But there are several ways you can support the Ski Podcast apart from going to Switzerland. That is, if you go to buy me a coffee, you can buy me a coffee at buymeacoffee.com/ski podcast. You can give us a review anywhere you want. I've noticed recently you can now give us a review on Spotify, but also Apple Podcasts, or there's still a chance to vote for us in the Sports Podcast Awards, and I'll put a link in the show notes about that. Now, my name's Iain Martin. We have mentioned Millie Knight's busy out in Beijing, which means today I'm joined live by regular guest Mike Richards. Hi, Mike. How are you?
Very well, thank you, Iain. Great to be back.
Yeah, last time I saw you was at the Birmingham Ski Show, where we were on the stage there with Simon Burgess talking about skiing around in the UK. I know you ski in Wales, and we've talked about that a lot before. Have you skied in the UK this winter?
I have. It's been a fairly poor winter in comparison with last year, where I got 23 in and Chris got 40 in, my ski partner. I'm up to 3 and he's up to 9 this year, but beggars can't be choosers.
But possibly that's because you've been allowed to go overseas, which was limited last year. So that's still good. I'm also joined today by our regulars, Katie Crowe from Battleface Travel Insurance. Hi, Katie. How are you?
Hi, Iain. I'm good, thanks.
And in the bottom right of my screen, I've got Al Morgan from SkiKitInfo.com. Hi, Al. How are you?
I am good, thank you, Iain. How are you doing?
Yeah, I'm very well. As I mentioned, I'm going out to the Alps next week. Quite excited about that. I'm hoping there's going to be a little bit of snow coming before then. The temperatures look fairly cold. I'm pretty confident that neither Katie or Al have been to the snow since we last spoke. So, Mike, tell me, when did you last ski?
Well, I was very fortunate to ski last Thursday in the Brecon Beacons.
What was the snow like there then?
Not too bad. Decent covering. Got it halfway home. So, a couple of 100 meters worth of vertical, about a kilometer's worth of skiing. Fairly mellow grass meadow skipping, but a lovely evening out. Nice.
Cool. I love that. We've been doing lots of features on the podcast recently about skiing in the UK, whether it's in Northumbria or in Scotland or in your case, Wales. And listen, if you're interested in skiing in Wales more, I'll put a link in the show notes. We had a long chat with Mike about it before. Let's move on to talking about travel. We mentioned that Mike's been able to go overseas. That wasn't possible last year. It seems to be getting easier and easier. Let's talk to Katie in the Battleface travel update.
Great. Okay. Well, we're here for the Battleface travel update with Katie Crowe. Now, I have to be honest with you. We actually recorded this first time round yesterday. And then typically, as soon as we'd recorded, France announced that they were going to be changing their rules. So here we are again, one day later. How are you going, Katie?
Yeah, that's right. As typically, things change so fast in the travel world. We are re-recording this. Well, it's a huge relief for tourists planning to visit France in the coming months, because yesterday the Prime Minister Jean Castex announced that the French vaccine pass will no longer be necessary in many venues across France from the 14th of March onwards.
The best thing about that really is you don't have to worry about having the app and printing out the app and having your QR code and all of that, because non-vaccinated travellers still are not able to go to France. You need to have a compelling reason. It's only if you're double vaccinated you can travel anyway. So by definition, if you were in a ski resort, you would have been double vaccinated. But it just means that you don't have to show that pass anymore to go into a restaurant, to go onto the lifts. And, mask wearing has been reduced significantly as well. And I think from tomorrow, there are going to be some changes in Austria in that respect as well.
That's right. Yeah. From tomorrow, March the 5th, all COVID protection measures will be lifted, except for mandatory masks, as you say, on public transport and in essential shops like supermarkets and post office and banks, etc. So again, that's really welcome news. Means that skiing in March is going to be easier in Austria.
Yeah. So overall, I think if you're fully vaccinated, there has been an announcement, I think, that the EU are planning to, try and keep the rules the same in every country, so that all British travellers who are fully vaccinated don't need to have any tests to go into EU countries. I think, it's worth pointing out at this stage that on the Battleface website, there's a really good travel tool where you can kind of check the latest information the whole time. I was actually looking at it earlier this morning just to check. But you just want to give us an insight into that, Katie?
Yeah, that's right. The Battleface Travel Hub will help you make decisions with regards to your travel plans, and it looks at the trip origin, destination, travel dates, nationality, and current restrictions in place in your destination country. So it really does provide up-to-the-minute information for travellers, and it's a really useful tool. So I'd recommend everybody who's planning on a trip to go onto the Travel Hub and check out the requirements.
Yeah, well, I have to be honest, I had looked at it a while ago. I hadn't looked at it more recently. I looked at it, it's very efficient, very easy to change it around, see what tests or not are required and what you need to be able to get into the country. And it's also worth probably pointing out at this point that the definition of fully vaccinated does vary from country to country, because in terms of boosters, I think, in France, for entry into the country, you need to have had your booster within 9 months, 270 days, and I think that's the same for Austria as well.
That's right. Yeah, I'd recommend you really do your research and check out the country requirements prior to travel, and also check out the FCDO travel advice as well, because that advice remains under constant review and can change at any time depending on the destination. So definitely worth checking prior to any trip.
Yeah, exactly. And I believe there's also talk that the passenger locator form coming back in the UK may be dropped shortly as well.
Yeah, that's right. Nothing official has been announced yet, but I understand that Transport Secretary Grant Shapps has been pushing for this form to be scrapped for some time now, really to help the travel industry get back on its feet. And there are definitely rumours that this change will be in place before families head out for their Easter holidays.
I personally don't find that so difficult. I fill it out so many times now. I've got like an account, and a lot of the fields are pre-filled. But when you end up in a queue coming into the UK or crossing a border, inevitably there's a whole bunch of people in front of you who haven't completed the form, and it just delays everything. It would just be much quicker if they didn't need to check that, didn't need to look at it, and hopefully that will happen as well.
Yeah, that's the last remaining requirement for vaccinated people, so hopefully it'll be scrapped soon.
Yeah. Well, that's great, Katie. So if listeners are looking to get insurance for their ski holiday, they can go to battleface.com, and they can obviously check the latest situation on the travel tool on the website as well. I know it's so nice after all of the many episodes we've had discussing, how things got more difficult, to be talking about how they've got easier again. That's brilliant, Katie. Thanks very much for rejoining me again today.
You're welcome. Great to speak with you, Iain.
So obviously people are travelling overseas at the moment. There's lots of people in the Alps. Some of my clients are completely sold out for March, which is great news for the industry as a whole. And we have a few snow reports from some of our regular contributors. So let's have a listen to those now.
Hi Iain, hi listeners, hi everybody. It's Andy from Kaluma Travel over in St Anton am Arlberg in the Austrian Alps. The last couple of weeks have been quite eventful weather-wise. We've had huge snowstorms. I think on the back of Storm Eunice from the UK, we received a pretty wild weather front where we had outright snowstorms for about 72 hours. It was quite epic. But after those snowstorms, it left a lot of snow and a lot of avalanche risk, a lot of danger, and it warmed up pretty quickly. So we literally went from sort of like minus 13, 14, 15 on the mountains, heavy snowfalls at night time, to the next day being sort of like plus 10. It really changed quite dramatically and put the avalanche risk up quite high. And you may have seen in the news, there were a few tragic avalanches a couple of weeks ago with a group of Swedish skiers and a local guide, sadly, not faring too well in the avalanche situation. So alert was quite high, but that's changed quite rapidly again. The last sort of like week has been beautiful weather. Clear blue skies, crisp snow, waking up in the morning to like beautifully broomed peace. It really has been quite nice. The avalanche danger's gone right back down to 1 in the Tyrol region. So it's not particularly dangerous off the piste at all. But saying that, the snow probably off the piste isn't that good to be skiing off piste at the moment. It has warmed up quite a lot, as I said. But piste skiing is superb, and getting towards the sort of like Easter season now, when the snow should be nice, the weather should be good, the sun should be shining, perfect for big bottles of rosé on a sun terrace. Good morning skiing, long lunches, and a bit of sunbathing ahead. Resort-wise, it's been pretty busy. It's certainly been busy for Kaluma in resort. The bookings this season have far outweighed our expectations, which has been really, really good. Everyone's having a great time. I heard an interesting fact from the tourist office the other day in St Anton, that British guests are actually 53% down on previous years. I think a lot of that has to do with Brexit and probably no doubt the pandemic as well. But hoping for next season we'll be able to push that number of UK visitors back up again to the normal levels. British guests used to make about 27 or 28% of St Anton's tourism trade, which was the highest percentage, higher than the Germans, higher than the Swiss. But sadly this season it hasn't been too good for the Brit market. But saying that, it has been really good for the Scandinavians, the Dutch, the Germans. They've been sort of coming in force, and resort has been busy. Certainly the last week or so, the Fasching week, the Carnival week over in Austria has seen lots of people out and about skiing. All's good. Looking forward to Easter. Looking forward to more snow on the way, hopefully next week. Once this warm fronts move through, top up the snow. Looking for a good end to the season. Hope everyone's well, and very much hope to see everyone on the snow. Cheers.
Hello Ian, it's Dave Burrows here from Snow Pros Ski School. I am here in sunny Morjan, and I'm here with my daughter Zoe, age 5. How are you?
Good.
You're good? Now, Ian needs to know what the snow is like. Is the snow good? You can't nod. You have to say, is it good?
Yes.
It's good. What is the snow like today?
Slippy and sludgy.
Slippy, and in some places it's a bit soft, isn't it? It's a bit sugary. But that's only the places where the sun is on it. What about on the other side where it's a bit shady? Is the snow grippy?
Grippy.
Grippy. All right.
And
cool.
bumpy.
And what's the weather like today?
Good.
What in what way is it good?
Sunny and blue skies.
Sunny and blue skies. Cool. So, Ian, it's a beautiful, beautiful time of year here. We have had high pressure here for must be going on for about 2 weeks now. And every night it freezes. So we're not sort of losing snow. If anything, like the snow is just getting better and better. And so, piste in the whole of the Porte du Soleil, Villars, Saint-Sergue, everywhere I've been recently are in immaculate condition. I went to Verbier the other day, same thing. Snow is kind of almost January-like. It's ideal skiing conditions. It's really busy up here, and the people love it. So we're enjoying having a good time. We're just going off for lunch now, aren't we? What are you going to have for lunch?
Spaghetti.
Spaghetti? Are you sure? You don't want nuggets today? No? And what happened to your biscuit earlier? What happened to your biscuit?
It fell over.
It fell off the lift. Oh, it's a shame, isn't it? Let's go find another one. All right, so from sunny Morjan, Ian, I hope you and all the listeners are doing really well. And get yourself out here, man. It's amazing. See you soon. Bye.
Hi Ian, Keith Webb here, giving you a snow report from the Kaproons LMZ area. Well guys, the snow has been really good up on the glacier. It's powder snow, compacted now since we haven't had any fresh falls for 5 or 6 days now. But it's still in great condition. The temperatures are always in the sort of -7 to -16 range. I mean, really, really cool up there if you're skiing. The sun has been out, so it's actually been pretty stunning up there most of the time. In the wider area is LMZ. It's skiable down into the village, although in the afternoon it gets quite heavy. Because it's so cold, it's not sort of slushy, but it's this granular sugar that just breaks up with you skiing on it, so it becomes quite heavy, and if the temperatures rise it will get quite soft. But at the moment the temperature seems to be holding, and for the arrivals on the 5th of March, which is in a couple of days, I think you're in for a fabulous weekend if you're coming to this area. The skiing from the Kits down into Kaprun from the Maiskogel is good at the top. Again, it's a little bit sort of heavy with this sugary snow down into the bottom. And as I said, if the temperature rises, it'll get a bit slushy. But the cover is good and it will last for quite a while. Certainly next week, there's no sort of adverse weather in the forecast. So it's looking good for conditions through the rest of March. So if you're heading this way, fantastic.
So thanks to Andy, Dave and Keith for those snow reports. And I've just got to say to Dave Burrows, I think he normally listens to the podcast. That is probably my favourite snow report of all time. Thanks very much to you and your daughter. So those are more regular kind of resorts that most people have probably may have come across or certainly would have heard of. Not many people, I imagine, will have considered going skiing in Turkey. Mike, it's great to have you back on the show. You are one of the most widely travelled skiers I've ever met. We've talked before about skiing in Georgia as well as Wales. Tell us about Turkey. When were you out there?
I was out there from the 3rd to the 13th of January. I was invited by Johnny Richards, who's no relation, who's editor-at-large for Fall Line Skiing magazine. Acting, a little bit of taking photographs, being the model, because it's a skiing magazine. He snowboards, so any photographs that we may have had of action kind of stuff, then he wouldn't have been suitable as the model for that. So that was a little bit different for me and may see myself in the magazine down the line.
So Mike, you're telling us that actually we've got a ski model on the show as well as an experienced traveller.
Well, I'll let you be the judge of that if it ever makes print.
Excellent. So you went out there in mid-January. Give us an idea of your itinerary. How did it go?
Well, one of the reasons Johnny was invited by Ovid Mountain, which is a backcountry centre that's in the Far East in the Anatolia region that comes off the Black Sea, and also by a gentleman called Erdem, who has a company called Ski Turkish, who's trying to develop the whole Turkish ski scene for the overseas market. They've had a domestic scene for a very long time. They've had quite a lot of neighbouring countries visit that area, depending on the snow conditions. Some, for example, if Georgia's getting the snow and Turkey's not, then people will go to Georgia and vice versa. So they've had a very strong and a very long ski scene in Turkey, but they're actively looking to try and get that Western European market to come in. So we were invited to do a piece for Fall Line Skiing to try and promote that.
And we're really looking at, in terms of Ovid, at the backcountry side of things. Is that right?
Ovid was purely backcountry. It's snowcat and snowmobile accessed ski touring and skiing. And then we spent a few days there initially, and then we went then to the resort areas. When
you say cat-assisted ski touring, you actually ski touring as well, or are you just getting your lift uphill the whole time?
It's a combination of everything. They're a very new operation, and they're starting to find their routes and their trails. They're building roads, and so it goes on. And then depending on the snowfall, and they're in a very fortunate position where that first storm comes off the Black Sea, picks up the moisture, and dumps it on the mountains that surround the valley. If they get a huge load of snow, then they can't put a cat up anyway, whereas they could ski tour or they could put a snowmobile up. So they're looking to cover all bases to try and make sure that everybody gets out every day.
Okay, and what sort of altitudes are we talking about here then for the lodge, and how high you might go up to?
So the lodge is at 2,640 meters, and then the skiing goes up to 3,800, although we only went around about the 3,400, 3,500 mark because of early season conditions. So a good 1,000 meters vertical.
Yeah, and that's pretty high. I mean, to put that in context for listeners, the highest ski resort in Europe is 2,300 meters at Val Thorens. So you're staying overnight at 2,600. Now, I've slept that high, quite a few times in my life overall. But did you find it all right sleeping at that altitude?
Just had to be aware of it. I mean, if you'd never been to those kind of heights before, then it could have caught you out. But if you know you're going to that sort of area, then you need to keep hydrated. And not really push yourself those first couple of days.
Right. Okay. And what were the conditions like? What's the terrain like there?
We were very, very lucky. The couple of days prior to our arrival, it had a good snowfall. Then there was a break, and then when we arrived in the afternoon, it just started chucking it down. So we had about 40 to 50 centimeters overnight on our first night. So we didn't think we were going to get out that first morning. The guides were very confident, but we got out before breakfast. The sunrises in that area are spectacular. It's a valley system. The guys that run over it, Kasia and Rushan, they own the valley. The families it's been in the family for
right.
many generations. So they own the valley, and in the summertime, the road links right through the valley system, and at wintertime, then the road is closed. So to even access it, we had to come in 8 kilometers in a snowcat just to get to the lodge.
That's great, although it reminds me a little bit of The Shining, which makes me slightly wary of it.
Thankfully, there was a lot of people there. Otherwise, it could have felt like that. But it's these guys are up there for the whole winter. So they've got a really, really sophisticated setup there. Brand new lodge, is only 2 years old. A full team of chefs, a lovely bar area. And it's really plush. Everything is brand new.
Okay, and what nationality were the other guests who were there then?
At the time we were there were a couple of people in from Istanbul and a couple of Russians who were living in Istanbul and working, who'd been there, for donkey's years. That's where they'd made their home. On
your first day there, you got 40 to 50 centimeters of fresh snow. Is that right?
Yeah, it was brilliant. So we set off early, just myself, Johnny, and then Tato, who was our guide. The three of us went out before the other guests that were in the lodge, and we ski toured only. So we went straight from the lodge, put our skins on. Johnny was on snowshoes. And then we went up about 500 or 600 meters vertical to one of the staging areas where they've got their setup. And then we clicked in, and then it started knee, then it went to mid thigh, and then it was over the head. So we were finding pockets of fantastic snow in no wind and great sunshine. So it was a perfect morning, right back for breakfast.
I can't tell you how jealous I am listening to that. That sounds just like amazing, like the perfect day skiing, and the other days were kind of similar in terms of access. I think you said it snowed quite heavily while you were there.
Yeah, so it snowed that first night, and after that we had sunshine the whole time. So it was a combination of that first morning we just started ski touring, and then by the afternoon they'd already put the first track in for the snowmobile. So then we would sit on the snowmobile. They had racks on the side of the snowmobile to put the equipment in. The driver would take you to a certain point, maybe 500-600 vertical meters above, and then you could either do laps from there or you could ski tour above that, and then each day the distance that they could travel would be further and further.
Okay, well, that sounds great. I'm going to put some links into the show notes for the Ovett Mountain Lodge. I think after that, you went on to a more traditional resort. I did a little Google of it. Said it had 43 kilometers apiece and 12 lifts. How was that second part of your trip?
That was fascinating because, I've been fortunate to go to places like Macedonia, Kosovo, Montenegro and Georgia, and everyone assumes that because you're going to the eastern part of Europe that everything's going to be second rate, and it's far from the truth. We got there and it was a fully developed resort. In terms of access, it was phenomenal. Erzurum is the city, and the airport was only about a half an hour transfer from the airport, from landing to get to your accommodation on mountain, and then they had one gondola that took you practically to the top of the system. There was one more chair above that, and then a number of other chairs to that height that sort of spread people around.
And what sort of altitudes were we talking about there? This is Palandokan, is that right?
Yeah, Palandokan. So we were, I know it's all these names where they ever stress the vowels and the consonants. Yeah. So we were at 2,200 meters is the base.
Yeah,
and the top of the summit of the mountain is 3,200, so 1,000 meters vertical, and it's part of what they call the Ege 3,200. So we were in Palandokan, and there's a nearby resort called Konakli, which we couldn't get to because the weather had closed the lifts for the couple of days we were there. But if you're based there, then you've got the choice of two resorts within a 15-20 minute taxi ride.
Cool. And one of the upsides of this is, the prices. You sent me a note earlier. I think we're talking about £6 or £7 for a lift ticket for the day.
It was crazy. It was £6 per day, and that included the night skiing. You could have it cheaper if you didn't want to do night skiing. But the day we arrived, because we'd had the transfer down from Ovid, we got there at lunchtime, had a quick lunch. Then we went out and skied the afternoon, and then went through then to the early part of the evening, watched the sun go down over the mountains, see the lights come on. Very extensive night skiing operation. So one of those places, I mean, I always find you go to these fantastic gateway airports when you go skiing, and you never get a chance to see the city, unfortunately. If you go, unless you're in Innsbruck, for example, that's one of the few ones you can do. So it was great that we knew that we could go to Erzurum, for example, in the morning if the sun was out, although the conditions weren't good, have a little look around the city, see the minarets, go to the mosques, go to the castle, the bazaars, those kinds of things, knowing that we could come back then and have a full afternoon and through to the evening of skiing. So it's a great combination in those things then.
Great. And I mean, I think to me, that is, the sort of person who's listening to this right now thinking, oh, that sounds of interest, is not the sort of person who wants to, I guess, ski amazingly fast lifts on huge ski areas. There's someone who wants to get a little bit more out of the experience and incorporate some of that cultural experience at the same time. And just out of interest, how did you find your Turkish hosts?
Brilliant. Could not have been friendlier. They're in a situation which I found in lots of Eastern countries where, why are you here? Not in a nasty way. It's, you've got great mountains closer to you. Why are you making the effort to come all this way? And when you explain to them that they've got the great snow conditions, they've got tremendous value for money, and it's something a little bit different. They're very proud of their country, and they're very proud to show you what's on stone. We went to Palandikin and we talked to people on chairlifts, and they would show us come with me, we'll show you around the corner kind of thing here. And Palandikin is fairly easy to work out. It's a big monolith of 360 degrees worth of skiing, all above tree line primarily. But we went for a day trip to another resort called Sarıkamış, which was very much very similar to my experiences on Hokkaido, where the tree line goes to the top of the mountain, runs a cut within the trees, and then there's lots of tree skiing but this is conifer forests. And there, you'd easy to get in, but obviously getting out is knowing how far you can ski down these runs before you need to pull out to get back to the lifts. And we were speaking with people on the chairs, people who'd come in from Iran, people who'd come in from Poland, people who Turkish who'd come in from the western part of Turkey, near Istanbul. And they were more than happy to show us their favorite parts of the mountain.
That's great. Now, we were talking in the green room earlier before we started recording, and you mentioned that, you were or had been planning to go back to Turkey. Obviously, the location is quite topical at the moment, some of those countries that you've mentioned because of its proximity to Ukraine. Do you know what the situation is for travel there and just now?
At the moment, there's been no official word. It's just kind of use common sense, I guess, and things are very much changing. It's a shame because this is an ideal opportunity for them to really make a push, because one of my followers on Instagram contacted me once he'd seen the reports that I was putting out from there. And because he had younger children under 18 and there was such a mess at the time in terms of what rules to get into various countries, he took a big gamble and he went to Palandikin with his family, mum, dad and 3 children. And recently returned only about last week. So he went for the school half term and he had an absolute ball. He said he's never had such great value for money. As a family of 5, the 2 adults and 3 children, they were skiing for the cost of 2 lift tickets in a normal resort in Western Europe. They were all having their lift tickets, lunch and all any breaks they wanted. There was that ratio of cost. Value. So,
I love that thinking outside the box. Unfortunately, it's always a similar issue. I seem to remember quite a few years ago, I think Crystal maybe brochured skiing in Lebanon just at the wrong time before again it became another destination that you couldn't travel to. And Katie mentioned before, just in case any of these things change, you can always check that FCO advice on the Battleface website as well. That's brilliant, Mike. I think we could probably talk for ages about that, but that sounds fascinating, and to put a whole bunch of links into the show notes. and some of the pictures, if we're allowed any of them, ahead of full line as well. Excellent. Thanks for sharing all of that with us. Katie?
My kids have actually been skiing in Turkey, believe it or not. Their father flies for Turkish Airlines, and so he lives in Istanbul, and he took them skiing 2 years ago in Turkey, just outside of Istanbul.
And you're going to tell us that they had a great time while they were there,
They had an
Katie?
amazing time. They absolutely loved it. Yeah, really fun.
That is really interesting, and therefore probably prompted a few ideas with people. Okay, let's segue to somewhere that might be more on people's radar. Last week I spoke to Yvonne Rosenstatter from Salzburgerland Tourism Board, and the reason I spoke to her is I saw this story about a train that runs from Sweden to Zell-am-Zee, Kaprun. And it's kind of similar in some ways to the new service by Travel Ski. And I was really interested, so I tracked her down and we had a little chat about it. Okay, I'm here today with Yvonne Rosenstatter. And Yvonne is in charge of international markets at Salzburgerland Tourism Board. Hi, Yvonne. How are you?
Hi, nice to meet you today. Thank you, I'm fine.
Excellent. The reason I wanted to speak to you is I don't really know how this came across my radar, but I was very interested to see that recently, I think about a month ago now, you ran a direct train from Malmö all the way in Sweden to Zell-am-Zee. And I don't know if you're familiar with the French market and how things are going, but this season, for the first time, there's a company called Travel Ski who restarted the direct train that goes all the way from London to the French Alps. And I found this really interesting, that this kind of idea is going on in the Austrian market and from Sweden as well. And I wondered if you could just tell me how that came about.
So how this came about, because since years, sustainable tourism development is for the Salzburgerland very important. And already some years ago, we started our conversations with the operator of this train, Snowsport, from Sweden. And we wanted to get back a direct night train, because we have direct night trains quite everywhere over Europe, but from Sweden, it's a main market for us, Sweden and Denmark, and we thought, why not getting a train back, starting sometimes already also in Stockholm via Malmö, Copenhagen to Salzburg, Austria, and they have stops in Zell-am-Zee, Bischofshofen, and Salzburg city. So this is very interesting for all skiers and to come on a sustainable possibility to Austria. And they have the choice between airplane, taking a car, or by a night train with this train.
Yeah, and I guess Sweden in itself, being the home of Greta Thunberg, we know that there's a strong kind of a sustainable movement and train movement as well there. And in fact, there's a word that I came across, because I don't know if you know, but I run a campaign called Ski Flight Free. So actually encouraging people to try and take the train. But I don't know if you've ever heard of, you probably have, I don't know about my pronunciation, tagskirt. Do you know that word?
No,
no. Well, it means in Swedish. It's a kind of opposite of flygskam, which is the shame, flight shame, etc. Yeah. And it means train bragging. And It's about how you can talk about traveling by the train as a way of, I don't know, some people might call that, like sort of showing off or virtue signaling or something like that. But the fact is that you can say, oh, well, I'm catching the train, and if you're going from Sweden, and this is out to specifically, this train was to Kaprun Zell-am-Zee, wasn't it?
And he also in Salzburg city via Bischofshofen, yes.
Yeah. And so, I find it really interesting. And is it, who is actually chartering the train or running that train?
So this train is run by Snowsport. They are a Swedish-based railway organization with a background with German, French background. Yeah. And even there have been some wholesalers which are selling ski holidays in Austria, which were interested and who already also were, such as on an airplane, they bought allotments on this train for the train journey for our winter sport guests to Salzburgerland in Austria.
For British people who are interested in travelling to Austria by train, obviously something from Sweden isn't going to work for them. But in fact, there are more and more options. without being able to go direct from the UK. I looked at the option before of catching the Eurostar up to Amsterdam, and then that actually connects quite well with a service from Amsterdam, doesn't it?
Yeah, that's right. There is a service from Amsterdam directly to Salzburgerland and even via Paris. So catch the Euro train, go to Paris, and from Paris, the night train to Salzburg city. And then you can just jump and go there everywhere you want from Salzburg directly with the train to the end destination.
And can I ask, Yvonne, is this a kind of key part of how Salzburgerland is trying to market itself to make it more of a sustainable destination?
Definitely, because nature was always very, very important for us. We already have an organic food production over 60%, in some villages over 80% in Salzburgerland. We know how important the CO2 footprint is. Even we know it's often hard for our guests to arrive with not arrive with a car or a plane. And so we focus to build up new cooperations with sustainable traveling possibilities. And so for us, it's as we're not on the sea, our only sustainable possibility we have is arriving by train and helping our guests to optimize the last food step, even if they're arriving by airlines, so that the final food step is as good from this perspective of CO2 footprint as possible.
That's great. I look forward to hearing some more of the measures that you're introducing. Certainly, from my point of view, it might be that I tend to view things through rose-tinted glasses, but I think there's a big demand in the UK for people looking for more sustainable ways of traveling. But there's a limit on the supply. There's a limit on the ways that you can do it. So the more ways that you can do it there are, the better it will be. So that's brilliant, Yvonne. I'm going to put a link to all of that in the show notes. And thank you very much for your time today.
Thank you. Bye.
One of the advantages of travelling by train is there are no ski carriage fees, which always appeals. Some people choose to hire their skis and boots anyway. Normally, when I'm out in the Alps, I'm getting something from Intersport Ski Hire. I like it because you can change your stuff, because normally at some point during the week, I've got regular alpine skis. Some point, I've got ski touring skis. But Al, I wanted to bring you on board. You're our equipment expert. A lot of people who will be going out, they don't have their own boots and they'll be hiring boots. And I think lots of people are kind of very worried about that, because when they're in the shop, they've obviously had their foot size checked. How do you tell if the fit is right? When is it that you should be asking for a larger size or a smaller size, or even if you've got a pair and you're thinking, oh, these are a bit uncomfortable, should you be changing after that? What's your thoughts?
You know what? This is a really good question, because I've been boot fitting for 20 years or so, and it's amazing that people aren't sure how a ski boot should fit when they put it on. And this, whether you're buying a boot, whether you're going to hire a boot, which is what you're referring to here, the points are still relevant. The first thing to know is we are all unique. So what I want as a feel on my boot and the compression that I want around my foot might be quite different to you, Iain. And also what I want in my piste boot for skiing really hard might be different to the fit that I want if I'm going to be touring. That hopefully isn't going to confuse people, but it's going to just allow you to get a good picture that there is no black and white in this. We are all unique. So the pressure that you like around your foot will be down to you specifically. Some people will like a lot of pressure around there if they've got a background in maybe they're a rock climber and they used to really snug fitting boot or a snug fitting shoe, because they're like a glove when you're climbing. My climbing shoes are about 2 sizes too small for me, but I like that compression on my foot, and it's reflected in ski boots. But it certainly wants to feel snug is good, is the way that I think about it. So good hold around the heel and forefoot, ankle and leg, but shouldn't be painful.
Yeah, I think shouldn't be painful. I think a lot of people maybe have it in mind that ski boots are just inherently uncomfortable, and therefore they might sometimes think, well, okay, this is slightly painful, but I guess I'll just put up with it. And I think the other issue that you've got there is that your feet kind of change size during the course of the day, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Do not be afraid of adjusting the boot through the day. A ski boot is not necessarily something that you put on in the morning and then you don't touch all day. If you've got a boot that you've invested a lot of time in and money to get fitted for yourself, that you've bought, because the fit on a bought boot, because of the time you can invest, can be more tailored than the fit in a higher boot, then yeah, it might be that you set them at the start of the day and not have to adjust them at all. Now on a higher boot, it's going to compress your foot through the day. It's like wearing a big cast, isn't it? Really, a compressive cast. So when you wake up in the morning, everything's a bit more kind of squidgy, if you want, a bit swollen from over the night. It's relaxed. And then through the day, you're doing sport, your heart's pumping, the blood and fluids moving around, and it gets compressed. So do adjust them. But back to your original question, when should you look at changing them? So the classic is somebody puts a ski boot on, they say, oh, I've got loads of movement in the heel, and they're trying to stand up on the toes. Now, that is not the position that we ski in. When you stand up on your toes, your heel changes shape. It gets a lot fatter. It's not as defined, and the boot can't hold it. Even in a race boot, the snuggest race boot, if you push up on the toes, you can get your heel to move. Don't use that as a sign that the boot fits or doesn't. Get in the ski position and then flex forward. It should be held around the forefoot, so it shouldn't be moving side to side and certainly shouldn't be loose. And in the heel, you should be able to feel it both sides of the heel and around your ankle bones, but it should not be painful anywhere. Another point that will really help the fit, when you get a higher boot, it might have a really flat footbed in there. The bottom of our foot is not flat. A boot doesn't bend, so get a supportive footbed. You can go to your local ski shop. You can buy an off the shelf, say a Superfeet green, Superfeet blue, and take that with you when you go and get your high boots fitted. Also take your ski sock, because then you're going to be getting fitted exactly how you're going to be skiing. Modern high boots are way better than they were 5-10 years ago. And you've raised this a few times. Intersport have a great fit system to ensure that they're going to get you in the best fit for your skiing, for your foot. And listen to them. They're experts. They fit thousands of people with this all through the winter. They do know what they're doing. But if you aren't sure if it's right once you've been skiing, do not be afraid to go back and then just talk to them about it. It could be they just need to adjust that boot, or they get you in a different model.
Cool. I think that's really helpful, particularly, what you should be doing, because I think maybe like a lot of more experienced listeners might be very confident about it. But I think a lot of people, when they put their boots on in the shop, they're not really too sure what to do. So that advice there is really useful. I think as well, it's worth pointing out that some people, often turn up to the resort on a Saturday and then go and get their hire equipment before skiing on the Sunday. So what you're saying there is very important to make sure that you take the socks you're actually going to be using along with you. And also you need to consider like what you're wearing at the time. If you're wearing jeans or leggings or something like that, going to be different from what you're wearing when you're skiing. You need to take that into account when you're trying them on.
Well, more about, can you pull the jeans up over the ski boot? And if you're so I always wear a 3/4 long john. I don't like anything in my boot apart from my footbed and my sock. That is me. I don't want any other seams in there. If you are the kind of person that wears your long john into your boot, that's going to affect the fit. You might not think it, but changing ski socks really impacts the fit of the boot. So make sure that when you're trying them on in the hire shop, apply the same, principles that you would if you're going to buy. Take your footbed. You really need some support under the foot because it needs it. You'll get way more comfort, more warmth, more power. Take the ski socks that you're going to be skiing in because it all impacts the fit. And what's something that's really relevant, and you see a lot, is people go, oh, but I'm a size 9. Why is that a size 8 ski boot? Casual shoes and ski boot sizes, there is almost no relation. Ignore it. They are precision fitting piece of footwear for a ski boot. And it's done in mondo point, which is a centimetre so length of your foot. So don't go, oh, I'm a size 13 shoe. Why am I an 11 ski boot? Don't try and match them up like that. That's not how it works.
Yeah, I think you have to trust the fitter in the shop. I know it can be frustrating, but that's really good. That's really good advice. And I thought, another advantage of actually hiring them during the week, and I'll put a link to this in the show notes, but Intersport will let you try and then buy like a new item, not the ones that you've actually used during the week at the end of the week as well. And just at this point, I might chip in. We may have discussed this before on the pod, but between now and our next podcast, Al, you're going to be going out and testing a huge amount of kit, I think, aren't you?
Yeah, so tonight I drive out through various countries in Europe to go to Austria. So there's an organisation called the Snowsport Industries of Great Britain, and this represents the trade and travel and media in the UK in snow sports. They organise a ski test, and the vast majority of brands attend. So I will go out and ski products, so boots and skis primarily, but looking at accessories, helmets, footbeds, goggles, many things around snow sports and it sounds fun, and don't get me wrong, it's great, you get to go and ski a lot of kit, but to get through 40, 50, 60 pairs of skis plus boots plus other things in 4.5 days, it's quite intense. So yeah, we'll bring you the lowdown from that on the next pod.
Well, that will be in episode 91, and we'll try and compress all of that into a conversation that will fit into the podcast. Let's move on to the Paralympics. I mentioned Millie Knight. She wasn't able to join us today because she is out in Beijing at the moment. Millie Knight is definitely one of our great chances for a medal. She won 2 silvers in Pyeongchang and a bronze in the most recent Worlds. She won a gold and a bronze. So let's have a listen to that conversation. You've got about a month to go until the Paralympics, haven't you?
We do indeed. It's fast approaching.
Yeah. When will you be going out there then?
So we fly out on the 25th of February. So I'm in isolation just now whilst I'm at home. And then we have a holding camp out in Austria beforehand where we'll obviously be testing all the time. So we enter the sort of the games bubble. And then we have to isolate in Paris for 2 days before we fly.
Well, I wish you all the best with that. I was doing a little bit of research prior to us meeting just now. I love the quote that I read somewhere where it says, I ski with my ears, which might sound weird to some people, but I think by now podcast listeners will know that you're visually impaired. Do you want to kind of just elaborate on what you mean by I ski with my ears?
Well, obviously, because I'm one sense down, my other senses are significantly heightened. I communicate with Brett through Bluetooth headsets in our helmets. So obviously Brett's guiding me down the hill. He'll tell me whatever's going on that he deems important. So whether the snow conditions have changed, whether the terrain is flat, steep, changing, rolling, whether there's changes in the course, vertically, hairpin, delay, like all sorts of things. And usually tactical and technical focuses too. And then I will say back whether I can still see him, whether I can't, whether I need to speed up, slow down, whether I'm on at each gate, off at each gate. And all of that communication happens within a fraction of a second. And I can gain a lot of information from the sound of his skis as well. So I can tell what the snow texture is like based on the sounds, and then Brett can also hear how confident I am by the sound of my voice and the way that I breathe.
Right, I mean that makes sense because when I ski, certainly you develop a feeling for snow, and you feel that through your skis, perhaps more than how you observe it with your eyes. I mean, obviously your relationship with Brett is fundamental to your ability to race, and you've been with him since 2017.
Yeah, obviously the guide-athlete relationship is critical. If that's not good, then the VI is likely to have confidence issues, lack of trust, and therefore performance won't be there. Obviously, my relationship with Brett is special for sure. It's something we've worked very hard on over the last 6 years. Yeah, I think we probably do have one of the best partnerships. There are a couple of partnerships that are siblings, and obviously they're significantly closer. But yeah, I'm very fortunate to have Brett.
When you started off, your mum was your guide, right? I could see how it's good to have a little bit of distance, perhaps sometimes. Knowing what it's like when I, for example, tried to teach my kids how to ski. You need to be able to separate those things. I just wanted to talk a little bit more about how it works, because a lot of people who maybe have never seen you or a visually impaired Paralympian in action might not get how it works. If I'm correct in saying that Brett will ski in front of you, so he'll be taking almost, if, for example, you're in slalom, the gate in front while you're one gate behind. That must be very hard. I get there's a rhythm in slalom, but if he's describing it, he's describing the gate that's one ahead of where you are already, right?
Yeah, for sure. So when Brett first came into the sport, he was like, whoa, this is so weird, because obviously skiing is a very individual sport. In a fizz race, you would never have more than one person on the course at once. And then all of a sudden, in our races, you've now got 2 people within 3 meters of each other, traveling at 120 kilometers an hour. So it is something that you have to be certainly on the ball with. Brett has to get the timings right of his commands. That's something that obviously comes second nature to him now, but was pretty challenging initially.
Yeah, and in fact, you talking about his ability to communicate being so fundamental. I know he is from the Royal Navy and is currently kind of on release to work with you. And I also read that I think he was a submariner, and part of his job, submariner, I should say, and part of his job was to give commands to the helmsman. So he's very used to kind of giving those very clear directional demands. So really almost a perfect fit for the role that he's playing with you now.
Absolutely. There's the skills that he learns in the Royal Navy. There's a lot of crossovers in those skills. Yeah, like you say, when he's on the planes, he has to be very, very clear, very, very confident with his communications, like he does with me. There can't be any doubt, there can't be any hesitation. He has to just say it, and I have to understand and listen.
Yeah, well, it obviously must be working, because you got together in 2016, Pyeongchang in 2018. There were a couple of silvers and a bronze medal. And I should point out as well to listeners that you don't just compete in slalom, which we mentioned now, but Super G and downhill as well, which is where you're getting those speeds of up to 115 kilometers per hour, is it? Yeah, I think you've wiped out at that speed as well, haven't you?
I landed on my face at that point, yeah.
But you're working together, and then last year in the World Championships, you got a gold in the combined and a bronze as well. So that partnership is obviously working well, and you're progressing. It may seem like a kind of a banal question, but what are your aspirations for Beijing then?
Yeah, so Brett and I have had some pretty cool results together over the last couple of years. Being world champions twice, overall World Cup globes and World Cup races and Europe Cup races and all sorts of things. Like, we have had successes, which has been amazing. But I think in recent times, we have been realistic with where we might place at the Paralympic Games. It's not a medal target that we're going for. It's very much performance outcome and process related. So that way we don't put the pressure on ourselves, nobody expects anything from us, and we can just purely focus on the performance.
Yeah, well, that sounds like the approach. So, I've been lucky enough to speak to quite a lot of athletes in my role, and ultimately you can't control what everyone else does. You can only control what you do, can't you? So that's the thing to focus on, isn't it? I wish you the best for the games itself. I was very interested, again, when I was doing a little bit of research, that what kind of moved you towards competing in Paralympic events to start off with? Was a meeting with Sean Rose at the London Ski Show. And I've met Sean on a number of occasions. And in my previous role, when I was running a website called natives.co.uk, we used to raise money for Disability Snowsport UK, and Sean would come along to a number of our events. And I'm wondering how you met him and what he kind of said to you at that time.
I was just a sort of a skier at that point. I just went on family holidays with my mum, and I loved it. Obviously, it was a massive passion of mine. And then we went to London Ski Show in 2010. He'd just come back from the Paralympic Games in Vancouver. It was the first time that I'd ever met a para athlete like me. He was just telling me about his experiences in Vancouver and how to get into the sport. And I just thought, wow, this is amazing. You're so cool. This sport's amazing. I want to get involved with this.
Great. Well, I really enjoyed my time with Sean. I've enjoyed chatting to you now, Millie, and I'd like to wish you and Brett all the best for Beijing when you go out there. Have a great time and stick to the process, and we'll follow how you get on.
Thank you very much. Thanks.
So we wish Millie and Brett all the best for Beijing and all of our athletes out there. Let's come back to the Olympics from the Paralympics. I saw Dave Ryding picked up a second in Garmisch. Now, he has had an amazing ski season. He obviously won his first World Cup race. This is his fifth podium, World Cup podium, I think, and he's currently fourth in the World Cup overall for this season. So he has had an amazing season. It didn't work out for him at Beijing. He went for it. You can't win every race. But we obviously came out of Beijing, I say we being Team GB, with a disappointing result. There were no medals for any of the skiers and snowboarders. I think there was a target of kind of 3 to 5. Certainly there'd been 1 in Sochi, 2 in Pyeongchang, so looking at 3. And, previously, GB Snowsport had announced an intention to be a top 5 ski and snowboard nation by 2030. Now, I had a look at the medals table, and that would mean 6, 7, maybe 8 medals to get to that position. I'm interested. Does it matter if Team GB didn't win any medals? I was listening to another podcast. They had an investment of over 9-10 million pounds. Another podcast where they said, well, we don't need medals. We just pay that money to be entertained. But I think probably we could have been entertained by the Olympics without necessarily seeing the GB skiers and snowboarders. Anyone on the podcast today have an opinion on that, Mike?
I think if we don't have any representation, and certainly don't have a broad representation in as many events as possible, then most people won't watch it. So, having a competitor from your own country, whether that's Scotland, England, Northern Ireland or Wales representing GB, I think that gives you an in, which you wouldn't necessarily have unless you were a die-hard follower and of winter sports. So the money side of things, it isn't a linear relationship of you put X amount in and your return is going to be Y. And I think because of the COVID situation where lots of our athletes couldn't travel to the training centers, then I think we'll see a springboard for the following games where they'll have an opportunity where they've had a chance to compete. They see what the levels are, especially the younger competitors, very young competitors. They see what the situation of travel, sleeping in a very controlled environment, being on a team. It's a very structured lifestyle, which perhaps they don't have as much when they're in their day-to-day training situations.
Sure. I mean, I think the point about COVID interrupting things is a factor for sure, and it's probably affected the British team significantly more than people from other nations. I interviewed Dave Ryding during lockdown 1. And, he was miles away from the mountains. Some of his Austrian competitors were actually on the glacier, skiing and practicing with gates. So there is a significant, disadvantage there. Al, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I can see why people may be disappointed by the medals tally that we had. We weren't the only country to come out of it disappointed. Some massive skiing nations were the same. The conditions were really challenging. They're not necessarily what the skiers and the technicians, because we have to get the preparation of the skis is really, really critical at this level of racing, of freestyle, of all sorts of things. You spoke about the whole Prada issue with the snowboard, and that impacted how that snowboard performed because then it couldn't ride in the same way. I was amazed by what we did. If we look at slopestyle, if we look at what the girls were doing, it was entertaining, but it's amazing. It's world class. And the money that goes into that side of sport is not just about the Olympics. It's about how we do at World Cup level. But think of all of the people that got inspired from the Olympics, from watching that. Mike, you're totally right. It's a springboard for what we're going to see in future generations. But do not let that belittle the effort that's gone in so far. It is amazing. And 2030 is the goal, not 2022 in terms of where we want to be from a competitive nation.
I mean, it does seem they're actually reining back on that idea of being a top 5 ski or snow sport nation. I think that was something put down by Dan Hunt, the performance director, and Vicky Gosling, who's the CEO of GB Snowsport, made a number of comments during the course of the Olympics to suggest that maybe that wasn't the absolute goal. You're talking about people being inspired, Al, but I think one of the points of trying to get medalists is that is really what breaks through. There's a lot of people who, either didn't know the Winter Olympics were going on or certainly didn't watch it because they weren't particularly interested. It's just on their periphery. Whereas a medal winner makes all the difference. And, some people will know that when Jenny Jones won her medal, Hemel Hempstead had their busiest day ever when she turned up and she was, available to talk to people. There were, queues of people out the door to see her on that occasion. And there was a real boost, following that. And without those medals this time round, it won't necessarily affect the flow of people through, but, talent identification is important. But we're talking about the flow of people into skiing as a whole. The more people who take up skiing, I know that they're looking to try and find people from other sports and pick people up from gymnastics or this or that where they have similar skills. But the more people who go skiing, the higher the chances are in the future of finding talent.
Absolutely right. And that is important from a competitive side. But I think you can look at this in a much more holistic manner. So anybody that gets inspired by the Olympics, the Winter Olympics, and then gets into snow sport is a great thing for snow sports as a whole. You know, it benefits all of us that work in it. And if the Olympics inspires somebody to go out to the mountains and do it, fantastic. Yes, if we got more medals, I don't doubt that more people would have got into it, but it's all a benefit.
Okay, well, we're clearly not going to be able to answer that question within kind of 5 minutes or however long we've been talking about this. You could possibly spend £9 million on bringing people into the industry, getting more people to take school trips overseas or getting them to go to indoor centres and, have an impact like that. There's evidently a lot of young talent out there as well. Kirsty Muir, she's only 17. She certainly, injuries notwithstanding, has a great chance. And the other person I remembered is Mia Brooks, who is a great talent for the future as well, who's also, very young. Wasn't even at the Olympics this time round. Almost certainly will be the next time round. Let's move to the close now. Reviews, comments are always welcome wherever you want to leave them. Apple Podcasts, Spotify, social media or email. Doug, I'd like to thank. He bought me a coffee, and also Nick D bought me a coffee. He said, great work. Best ski podcast. Talking of which, we're still in the running for the best winter sports podcast in the Sports Podcast Awards. You're very welcome to vote for us. I'll put a link in the show notes. And some good news, listeners. Stickers are back. I now have more Ski Podcast stickers, which you're welcome to put on your helmet or your skis or put them anywhere with a bit of guerrilla marketing around the Alps. We had a Instagram post the other day where someone took a photo of, I think, a lamppost in Chamonix, which happened to have one of our stickers on that may or may not have been placed by me back in last summer. So I enjoy all feedback about the show. Please do email. You can follow me at Skipedia and the podcast at the Ski Podcast. But for now, I'd like to thank Switzerland Tourism for sponsoring the show and thank my guest today, Mike.
My absolute pleasure. Look forward to coming back on in the very near future.
We love having you on, Mike, and thanks for sharing all of that today. Katie?
Thanks for having me as always, Iain.
Thank you, Katie, and Al.
Thank you, Iain. It's been fun.
Excellent. So finally, listener, I'd like to thank you for joining us. Until next time, goodbye.